first PG student in Bhubaneswar. Now easy names. Today, actually, I was supposed to take optic now. I will divide tomorrow's lecture one part portion and the other. Today I will speak on optic now. I will on the visual pathway, then the optic now will come. So I will space out this lectures into two parts. One, whatever I say, you please note down, and then tomorrow morning we'll meet at 9 a.m. Now, rods and cones. Photoreceptors in retina of both eyes, rods, scotopic vision, dim light and black and white vision, most numerous at ora serrata, absent on Fovea centralis. Photopic vision, bright light, color vision, most numerous in central part of the retina. Fovea centralis contains cones only. This is important, rods and cones. Now, rods and cones are absent at optic disc, which forms blind spot of the retina. If you do an ophthalmoscopic examination of the retina, then you will see the rods and cones are absent at optic disc, which forms a blind spot. It forms a blind spot of retina. The interior of the eyeball, see, this is the interior of the eyeball, this is the iris, this is the pupil, this is the cornea, this is the ciliary muscles, controls the lens, vitreous humor, iris, the fovea point of central focus, and this is the macula, and blind spot is here. This is the optic nerve, this is retina, rods and cones. This is the retina, rods and cones. Now, the blood vessels are here, the artery, the vein, horizontal cells, hemicrine cells, axons from ganglion cells, bipolar cells, and receptors. This is the optic nerve. Now, projection of field of vision upon retina is inverted and reversed with respect to objects because of the lens. A section of the human eye. This is the section of the human eye. Now you are seeing a plant here, the pupil, the iris, the ligament, eye muscles, the lens, cornea is here, this ciliary muscle, sclera, the white of the lens, sclera, the retina, optic nerve, blind spot, and fovea. Here's fovea. See, it is the projection of field of vision upon retina is inverted and reversed with respect to objects because of the lens. Eta ulte ache. The visual pathway, three sets of neurons convey impulses from rods and cones to striate area 17 of the visual cortex. Perception of vision, lateral view of visual pathway. This is the brain, the visual cortex, the occipital lobe, it's in the occipital lobe. Now this is the optic nerve, optic chiasma, this is the eye and superior colliculus, lateral geniculate nucleus, visual cortex. This is the side view. Now retinal fibers leave half of the image in the opposite side. The retinal fibers leave half of the image in the opposite side. Mutual crossing is known as optic chiasma. Mutual crossing is known as optic chiasma. Nasal fibers mix with uncrossed temporal sector to form the optic tract. Cell stations in brain lateral geniculate body, relay station. Fibers spread out to reach the final destination, the visual cortex. So the pathway, ultimately, it goes into the occipital lobe. See, this is the visual cortex. This is the superior colliculus. Optic chiasma, the crossing, the retina, the optic nerve, lateral geniculate nucleus of the thalamus. This lateral geniculate nucleus of the thalamus is the visual cortex. Now, you see the right, left and the right. Optic nerve, optic chiasma, optic tract, lateral geniculate body, and left visual cortex in blue, view of the right visual field. It will now visual field of right retina reversed by the lens. Nasal half of each visual field crosses to the opposite hemisphere. Nasal half of each visual field crosses to the opposite hemisphere. Right and right visual cortex, view of the right visual field. Primary visual cortex. Now features: sensory end organ, neurons of the first order, neurons of the second order, neurons of the third order. Sensory end organs, rods and cones, nerve endings in the skin. Neurons first order lie in bipolar layer of retina, lies in the posterior root ganglion. Neurons of the second order lies in the ganglion of the retina, uses the nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus. Neurons of the third order lie in the geniculate body and lie in the geniculate body. Now, first set of neurons represented by bipolar cells of the retina, which receive visual impulses from rods and cones and make synapses with ganglion cells in the inner part of the retina. In periphery of the retina, on ganglion cells is connected with 300 rods and 70 cones. In the periphery of the retina, one ganglion cell is connected with 300 rods and 70 cones. At Fovea Centralis, one ganglion cell is connected with only one cone. Cellular structure of the mammalian retina. The light falls here, the blind spot, and optic nerve. Now, retinal ganglion cells, the amacrine cells, these purple, and bipolar cells, these are the horizontal cells, the cone receptors and rod receptors, back of the eyeball. Now, this you have to remember. It can come as a short note. Now, again, the pigment epithelium, rods and cones, outer limiting membrane, Muller cells, horizontal cells here, amacrine cells, ganglion cells, nerve fiber layer, inner lining of membrane. Now, ganglion axon, ganglion cell layer, bipolar cell layer, receptor cell layer, cross section of the eye, cross section of the retina. Second set of neurons formed by ganglion cells of the retina whose action forms optic nerve, optic chiasma and optic tract. Now, second set of neurons formed by ganglion cells of the retina whose actions form optic nerve, optic chiasma and optic tract. At optic chiasma, temporal fibers of the retina passes uncrossed to the corresponding optic tract and nasal fibers decussate. They just decussate like this. Okay. And pass to the opposite tract. One optic tract contains temporal half of the same retina and nasal half of the opposite retina. Nasal half, temporal half. The retina, the optic chiasma of the temporal fibers of the retina uncrossed to the corresponding optic tract and nasal fibers decussate and pass to the opposite optic tract. One optic tract contains temporal half of the same retina and nasal half of the opposite retina. Each optic tract conveys information from the opposite field of vision of the environment. See, this is a schematic drawing. The whole thing, this is optic nerve. Crossed fibers, uncrossed fibers. The optic tract, commissure here, and of garden, pulvinar nucleus, lateral geniculate body. Now superior colliculus, here the nucleus oculomotor nerve, nucleus of trochlear nerve, nucleus of the abducens nerve, medial geniculate body. Now this is the cortex of the occipital lobe. You have to draw, practice, because it can come a question of 10 marks. Third set of neurons, formed by cells in 6 layers of lateral geniculate body. Crossed fibers of optic tract make synapses with cells in layers 1, 4 and 6. Crossed fibers of the optic tract make synapses with cells in the layers of 1, 4 and 6. Uncrossed fibers make synapses with cells layers 2, 3 and 5. The uncrossed fibers make synapses with cells in layers 2, 3 and 5. Crossed fibers of the optic tract make synapses with cells layers at 1, 4 and 6. Axons of the third neuron project to the striate area 17. Axons of the third neurons project to the striate area 17 of visual cortex through optic radiation. Now, lateral geniculate body, large magnocellular neurons, M cells, these M cells here. Perception of movement, gross depth, large magnocellular neurons, M cells, 1 and 2. Now, perception of movement, gross depth and small difference in brightness. Small parvocellular neurons, P cells, 3, 4, 5, 6. 3, 4, 5, 6. Parvocellular neurons and X ganglion cells. Color perception, texture, shape and fine depth. The color perception, texture, shape and fine depth. Conicellular cells, K cells or interlaminar cells. The K cells, here K1, K2, K3, K2, M2, M1. Now, short wavelength blue cones. Now, distribution of higher order visual processing. Distribution of higher order visual processing. The optic nerve with the optic chiasma, lateral geniculate nucleus. This is the optic radiation here. And in the occipital lobe. Now this is color, this is the motion and this is the form. Optic nerve and optic chiasma here. Optic tracts, lateral geniculate nucleus, dorsal, parvocellular pathways, primary visual cortex, ventral, magnocellular pathway, lateral geniculate body, a nucleus in the thalamus which projects to first degree visual cortex and serves visual perception. This body is the site of termination of all optic nerves except few which reach and relay in the pretectal region and superior colliculus of the midbrain. Now see, parvocellular layer and magnocellular layer. This is the magnocellular layer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The optic tracts, ipsilateral retina and contralateral retina. These. You have to draw all diagrams. Now, consists of 6 lateral geniculate body, a nucleus in the thalamus which projects to first degree visual cortex and serves visual perception. This body is the site of termination of all optic nerves except few which reach and relay in the pretectal region, superior colliculus of the midbrain. Consists of 6 laminae, contralateral retinae 1, 4, 6, ipsilateral retina 2, 3, 5. LGN has 2 types of main layers, parvocellular layer and magnocellular layer. This magnocellular. This is parvocellular. Now, lateral geniculate body. Lateral geniculate body, crossed fibers 1, 4, 6, uncrossed fibers 2, 3, 5. And this is left lateral geniculate body. Now, a corresponding part of the retina ends in neighboring part of the adjacent lamina. Smallest lesion of retina results in degeneration of 3 lamina of LGB in which retinal fibers end. Optic radiation begins from 6 lamina. Lesion of visual cortex will cause degeneration of all 6 lamina. Lateral geniculate body, the macular fibers posterior 2/3 of the lateral geniculate body, upper retinal fibers medial half of the anterior 1/3 of the lateral geniculate body, lower retinal fibers lateral half of the anterior 1/3 of the lateral geniculate body. This is the macular fibers, this is the lower retinal fibers, the upper retinal fibers, arrangement of fibers in the lateral geniculate body. Optic radiation, axons from the 3rd order visual neurons in the lateral geniculate nucleus runs in the retrolenticular part of the internal capsule and forms the optic radiation which curves dorsomedially to the occipital cortex. Now, optic radiation can be a short note. Now, fibers representing the lower half of the visual field sweep superior to reach the visual cortex. Above the calacrine sulcus, those representing the upper half of the visual field curve inferiorly into the temporal lobe, Meyer's loop, before reaching the visual cortex below the calacrine sulcus. The optic tracts, lateral geniculate nucleus, superior colliculus, biopulvinar, and right visual cortex. The optic tracts, optic nerves, optic chiasma, fovea, the right eye and the left eye. Optic radiation, see, optic radiation can be a short note. Upper unicular ocular fibers, upper peripheral fibers, upper macular fibers, lower macular fibers, lower peripheral fibers, lower uniocular fibers. You draw a diagram and practice arrangement of fibers in the optic radiation, inferior retina to the lower part of the optic radiation, superior retina, upper part of the optic radiation. Optic radiations, genico-calcarean pathways extend from the lateral geniculate body, visual cortex. This part, temporal horn of the lateral ventricle. This is the visual cortex. The Meyer's loop. This is the eyeball. The Meyer's loop, inferior retinal fibers pass through the temporal lobe, looping around the inferior horn of the lateral ventricle. This is temporal bone. This looping here. And Barum's loop, superior fibers directly posteriorly through the parietal lobe, occipital lobe and internal capsule relay on the visual cortex. Striate area of occipital cortex include both walls of calcarean sulcus involving cuneus and lingual gyrus. Macular part of the retina occupies posterior part of the visual area, extending backwards to the lunate sulcus, upwards to upper polar and downward to lower polar sulci. Peripheral part of the retina is represented in the anterior part of the visual area. Mononuclear crescent of visual field occupies most anterior part of the striate area. The upper uniocular fibers, lower uniocular fibers, lower peripheral fibers, lower macular fibers, upper macular fibers, upper peripheral fibers. Macula posteriorly, peripheral retina anteriorly, upper retina above calcarean sulcus, lower retina below the calcarean sulcus. Impulse from corresponding 2 points of the retina meet. Right visual cortex receives impulses left half of the visual field. Left visual cortex receives impulses on the right half visual field. This is important. Now, visual cortex, it is located on the medial aspect of the occipital lobe, above and below the calcarean fissure. Now, visual cortex, visuopsychic area, visuosensory area, peristriate area 18, parastriate area 19, parastriate area 17. Now, two-stream hypothesis. Now, visual agnosia, spatial location, parvocellular pathway, visual cortex, ventral pathway, parvocellular temporal lobe, and dorsal pathway, magnocellular parietal lobe. Now, integration of vision and movement, mostly magnocellular pathway. Now, and mixed magnocellular parvocellular pathway, mostly parvocellular pathway. Now, the movement perception, the lamina 4B, 4 to posterior parietal cortex, integration of vision with movement. Now, mostly magnocellular pathway, posterior inferior temporal cortex. Now, color and brightness, this portion of the brain, color and brightness. Thin stripes of V2 lobes of 6, mostly inferior cortex, here shape, analysis of visual attention. Interstripes of V2 and interlobes of V6. Visual association areas 1, V3 sends into the basal ganglia and midbrain. V3A perceive motion and direction. V4 lingual and fusiform gyrus, color. V5 medial temporal visual region, speed and direction, origin of pursuit movements. V6 parietal represent extra personal space. Primary visual cortex, area 70, located on either sides of within the calcarean fissure. Upper field projects to the lingual gyrus, lower field project to the cuneus. Macular representation is most caudal to the area 70. Now, the peripheral area representation is the rostral, 2/3 of the area 17. Lesion of area 17 results in blindness in the contralateral visual field. Lesion in area 17 results in blindness in the contralateral visual field. Association visual cortex, areas 18 and 19. Input from area 17 elsewhere and deals with the complex aspects of vision. Lesion of result in visual agnosia. Now, retinotopic representation, central macular vision, peripheral vision. The reference point is the visual fields. Now you see, optic nerve begins at optic disc, the blind spot where the fibers of the stratum opticum coverage pierces the outer layer of the retina, choroid and lamina. Cribriform sclera at posterior part of the eyeball, 3 mm to the nasal side of the posterior cone. During its passage through tunics of the eye, it acquires myelin sheath. Optic nerve passes backwards and medially through posterior part of the orbital cavity, optical canal, and joins with the optic chiasma and cranial cavity.